Thank you for staying with us. Now we're starting with a very, very sore matter this morning, the matter of meters.
Is it the matter of meters that's sore or the electricity part?
The whole thing, the whole thing. You know, last week we were saying that our own headache was, why should we have to pay for meters that don't belong to us?
It belongs to you, you're using it.
Yeah, I'm using it, but when I'm leaving the building, I don't get to take it with me. Like my former office, for instance, the place had a one-phase meter. I changed to a three-phase meter and paid for it. But when I was leaving the building, it was a landlord's meter. But I had paid for it. So why are we paying for meters that don't belong to us? Well, I suppose we'll have a chance to ask those in charge this morning. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, has announced an upward review. What? It's not enough you're paying. Now, the price has gone up. Well, they have announced an upward review of the unit price of end-user meters under the Mass Asset Provider and the National Mass Metering Regulations. Wow. Nigerian consumers.
Don't. We have all the people who are going to, the consumers.
The load is getting, I mean, we're being ground into the ground.
Calm down.
With all the bills and everything.
The solution is here. The manufacturers are here, the consumers are here, and the regulators are here.
Right.
The only one missing is the disco, but we'll get to that.
Right. Okay. So, in Lagos with us, we have the pleasure of having Chantel Abdul, who is a meter manufacturer, and she's of Mojek Limited. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We also have the president of the Consumer Rights Advancement Organization, Chief Adeolu Ogunbanjo. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here.
And joining us from Abuja, it's my pleasure to welcome the Deputy General Manager, Consumer Affairs and Chairman of the NERC MAP Committee, Mr. Dr. Shitu Shuaibu. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, listeners.
And also there is Mr. Olabode Showume, who's an energy expert. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Okay. I think I will start with Dr. Shaibu. You know that question that we were talking about as we were opening? That's the one that's bothering many people. Why do we have to pay for meters that don't belong to us? And now you come out and tell us that the price has even gone up.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome again, Nigerians, to this very interesting program. And it's important that we reiterate critical elements about the Nigerian electricity sector. Electricity is quite an essential commodity. It's quite expensive, and its entirety from generation to transmission all the way to distribution is quite capital intensive. And ideally, like you said, why do you have to pay more? You pay more not because you want to pay more, but because of the exigencies that are prevailing within the country presently. But for you, a typical consumer is ideally pays for everything he consumes through the bill. So really paying directly for meters is, we might say, an aberration, but a necessity in the present circumstances given the metering emergency we have. So what the regulator actually did was not to increase the price of meters, as it were, but just to reflect the realities that we're facing now in terms of foreign exchange volatility. But that's a temporary measure, given that we are having the mass metering program, which has been initiated by the federal government, and will soon enter. We have actually started the procurement process for 4 million meters, which has been subsidized by government to the distribution companies. That would definitely, but in the meantime and in between time, we have to ensure that Nigerians still get metered. Whatever Nigerians pay out of pocket will be refunded under the meter asset providers regulation. So if you are having to voluntarily pay for meters out of pocket, you will definitely get your money refunded back to you in terms of credit as you buy electricity on a monthly basis. The notion that we actually
Dr.
pay for
Shaibu,
meters,
just a second.
is,
Please pause. If you don't mind,
okay.
In order for me not to get lost, please help me understand this. On the one hand, you said it's not an increase, but it is an increase. I'm trying to understand that. And then
Okay.
I'd like you to help us understand how I will pay for a meter with 58,661 naira for a single phase meter, and then I'll get value of 58,661 naira back. Why don't you just give me the meter for free, and then I will buy electricity credit on the go?
Well, like I said, there are the meter asset providers regulation, and the National Mass Metering Program gives room for two ways by which a customer can get metered. The first, of course, is the initiatives by the federal government, whereby we have 4 million meters that will be distributed to all consumers. In quotes, for free, but it's not really free because the distribution companies are really being given some soft loans by the government for these meters, which they will pay back over a period of time. The bill, your tariff, is usually based on an accumulation of all of the components of electricity, from generation to transmission to distribution, inclusive of meters. So you're actually not getting anything for free. You're actually paying for the meters when you pay for electricity on a monthly basis. The only aspect that we're talking about, the MAP part of the meter asset providers regulation, is if you go out of your way, decide that, okay, you are not interested in waiting for the meter to be installed through the national mass metering, and you pay extra. The modalities for paying you back is through your monthly credit. So because that's like paying twice for the same item, but given that we have the meters, for instance, are meant to ensure that you get value for money, you pay for that which you consume, and the issue of estimated billing, which is really the main issue that is making the metering an issue now, is completely eliminated. And more critical again to the survival of the sector is the revenue is accrued to the operator, so that we can continue having electricity. So the modalities of meters, if you choose not to avail yourself of the opportunity of paying upfront, it's voluntary. This aspect of paying is voluntary because the federal government has issued it. Actually, we've finished the deployment of almost a million meters since October to this year under the National Mass Metering Program, and another 4 million meters again are being procured by the federal government through the local meter manufacturers to ensure that every Nigerian customer, is metered. The electricity customer is metered. So
okay,
you will get, but in the meantime and in between time, before the mass metering, because procurement process has commenced for these meters, I'm sure with the likes of Chantel, who is sitting with you there, we'll be able to achieve the goal of metering all Nigerians.
Before we go to the other guest, Mr. Shaibu, please, quickly, correct me if I'm wrong. What I understand from this, therefore, is that should I choose to pay for my meter before MAP gets to me, what I pay in electricity is not necessarily reflective of my consumption. There's an additional cost Is that what you're saying?
Yes, what you pay for electricity is an additional cost. So that additional cost, the Commission has made sure you will get that refund in terms of credit. So for instance, if you buy electricity for maybe 20,000 naira and you had advance money for the meter, what you will get is probably 25,000 nairas worth of electricity if 5,000 naira is the monthly refund that you are expected to get.
Okay, all right.
So you get that refund,
Okay.
unlike any other person who has a meter that's installed, either by the distribution company or through the National Mass Metering Program. So if you decide to pay, and it's voluntary, strictly voluntary, the regulation stipulates that you don't have to pay.
Okay. Mr. Showme, you are an energy expert. Would you kindly explain to us how come a building is completed by a house owner and the house owner lets the house out without a meter?
I think fundamentally it's important to realize and understand that the meter is a property of the system, the distribution company, so to speak, in this case.
Yes.
So if the distribution company does not make available a meter for the house owner, he is not in a position to get a meter that will be functional for that house. So I think that needs to be, in just the same way that the owner of the house is not at liberty to determine the rights or the authorities or the permission to build this house. So there's a system, there's an authority in place to determine that.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Showme.
You're trying to
So
say something?
how come he's able
Yes,
to
ma'am.
get power into the building without a meter from the distribution company?
Well, that's Nigerian magic, if you are to ask me. But obviously, he's not supposed to.
Thank you.
I'm assuming that the source of power into that building is not by the distribution company, because technically there won't be a reason for the distribution company to energize the building without putting a meter. However, it is important to note, we're speaking to each other as Nigerians here, not necessarily trying to hold brief for anybody. There is a value chain which starts from generation to transmission to distribution and to the final consumer who consumes. There is nobody that actually is smarter than anyone. Whatever power anybody consumes, somebody pays for it. So if you have a neighbor who is actually trying to be, technically we call it smart, what happens is that he's cheating the system. And we have a system that in itself is dysfunctional. What we should know is that if the system should collapse, we'll be talking about greater difficulties. So the first thing is that within the capacity of everyone, we should first of all do the right thing. Then the second aspect is when we talk about all these price increases, the infractions that come within, those are things we now need to look at on the long run and all that. But when you have a meter or you have a neighbor that has a house that has a faulty or wrong connection, it is incumbent on somebody to let the authorities know. I think that should be put out there.
Well, we're still talking about meters, definitely throughout this conversation, and I'm still a little befuddled. Maybe my brain is yet to boot. But, madam, you'll probably be able to throw some light. You're a meter manufacturer, and we've had all kinds of metering programs. MAP and this NMMP, NNMR are just two of several that we have had over time, which hasn't, up until this moment, helped us to get many homes metered, and many people really do the responsible thing about paying for electricity and all of that. From your perspective, what exactly is the challenge we are confronting here?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on the program. It's a pleasure to be here and to address Nigerians. I'm glad you mentioned where we are. Maybe 7 years post privatization. I want to cast our glances back to where we were pre privatization. Most Nigerians were estimated bill there was very little pervasiveness of meters to most Nigerians. And for us as a company, one of our immediate mandates and why we actually went into manufacturing was that we couldn't just continue importing meters for a country where there was an 80% metering gap in Nigeria pre-privatization. And I think a lot of people don't know that or appreciate that pre-privatization, there wasn't a pervasiveness of meters. And so we took it upon ourselves, alongside several other manufacturers in Nigeria today, right, to invest, right, in building and producing, researching, right, to find cost-effective designs, right, of electronics that could work as meters. And what is the meter? I tell everybody that a meter is simply the POS of the power sector. As the gentleman who spoke before me and Engineer Shuaibu said, everybody has invested along the chain at the very top of the chain. So from the gas provider to the generator, the generation companies, to transmission down to distribution. The cost is in the billions of dollars.
We understand all of that.
So that POS, right, is so important.
We understand all of that. And everyone knows that there is a cost to every service.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, it feels like it's the consumer that is at the brunt of it all. It's the consumer who is already belabored, as Acelera said earlier, with so many other issues, is belabored with this particular one. So I'm still at a loss. On the one hand, we're told, okay, the federal government has approved free meters.
Absolutely.
And now we are hearing it's no longer free, it's free, but it's not free. I'm confused.
I can understand your confusion. And I'm actually here to set that record straight, that the layman is confused on the street. I couldn't agree more. And actually, we're here to set that record straight. These are unprecedented times. We have never seen a government intervention coming in to invest in meters for the general public. And I must applaud this government, to be honest, because at the start of it, they pretty much said, you know what, we will come in and we will provide the funding necessary to invest and provide these meters. So for clarity, the meters are free under the National Mass Metering Program. And interestingly enough, that program started around this time last year. And a year later, we've done over 1 million meters. When you combine all the meter manufacturers in Nigeria, we've actually, well, the truth is, when you now begin to look at how long it takes to produce and get those meters out there, meters are not, it's not rice, you're not cooking rice. You're bringing in components from different parts of the world, assembling them, putting them together, manufacturing it to produce it. But I think what's important is it's a 6 million metering program. 4 million has already begun, meaning the next phase of that program has already begun. That program, we're going to go through an RFP or what have you. What the map and what came out in the press last week is simply saying if you can't wait for the free meters to come on, you can choose to, right, pay for it up front. You are just funding what will be refunded back to you. It's a mandate. It's part of the regulation. So if you choose to pay for yours up front before you get the free meters, it is actually you just paying, but you shall be refunded. And I'm certain, because in the early days of privatization, there was a program called the CAPME, which was the same thing. Discos were giving out free meters. CAPME was going on, right? And it was called Credit Advanced Procurement of Meter Infrastructure. So you can decide to pay for it again and you will be reimbursed back with energy credits. And I know for a fact that we actually checked, the commission checked then, and they will do so now also, that the discos will be required to refund the customer back with energy credit. But this NNMP is unprecedented. We've never seen an intervention where, we get free meters as Nigerians. And it's been funded by the CBN and by the federal, it's a federal government initiative funded by the CBN.
Many people are still wondering, okay, so 6 million meters free, is that all that we need? But we'll come to that later.
Excellent.
Chief, let me ask you, how are consumers, you've been at this for what, 20 years now? So talking about, consumer protection or consumer interests and all of that. How have you taken all of this on board? As she said, we've had CAPME, we've had MAP, okay, we have MAP and NMMP now. Anyway, how are consumers taking all this?
Thank you very much. To a large extent, it is free, but not free. I'm sorry, that's the experience. Now, they will tell you, you go on net, fill some forms and all that. It can take forever. They would also now, their energy sales representative, that is the discos now, will now tell you, well, look, don't forget, these things, there are so many people, applying for it. So we have 1 or 2 people somewhere that you are going to see and pay 5,000 naira each per meter.
To get a free meter.
To get a free meter. Where? They will tell you.
I'm sure NERC is going to say to us, don't go to anybody and don't
tell
pay
you-
5,000 naira to anybody.
It's
called extortion.
It's not receipted, but then that is the process. You go there, truly, you get to see them, and then you pay this meter. Sometimes, if you are lucky, it's not even all the time. 50% of the time, they attend to you. Some people have paid, by the time I said I was coming to this program, so many people have still paid the 5,000 naira to their agents in quotes, and they still haven't gotten anything.
Please pause. Dr. Shaibu, is this correct? Are you aware of this information?
Chief,
I'm telling you,
it's not
fact.
possible.
Just a moment. Let's speak with the chairman of the committee in charge. Are you aware of this information, sir?
Well, if a case is not reported, sometimes really what you get hearsays. But I will not say I'm not aware of people complaining, they call, but I can assure you for every case that is reported, we've actually investigated and dealt with. Oftentimes we have the distribution companies working with the MAPs, the meter asset providers who are out there. So you find the chain for metering moves beyond even when you register for a meter. If you apply for a meter online, for instance, you go through a documentation process, and then a meter is now allocated to you. The MAPs under the present dispensation are given the responsibility of ensuring that that meter gets installed. The last chain, the last part of the chain is, of course, the installers. But in between, if you decide that you probably want to do anything out of the standard, procedure, you might get, exploited by others, but most certainly,
Dr.
whoever
Shaibu,
asks you for
my apologies.
any amount.
My apologies.
Yeah.
This accusation, you can't go to Oyingbo Market or Kubwa Market in Abuja to get a meter. You have to go to maybe a disco or something. Right? If that is if that's the case, has there been any sanction on any disco, any one of them made to be aware of this and taking on as a result, just to address it once and for all?
Well, we have, for all the cases that have been reported, we've dealt with those cases, and more often than not,
I'm talking about
the chief mentioned
a particular disco, maybe a particular distribution company where people went to. Has there been any such specific distribution companies' offices that people had to go to?
It's oftentimes not a distribution company. It's often individuals, like the chief mentioned, individuals that are usually faceless, and when you now even sometimes, unfortunately, with the customers, you now say, okay, can we know who collected this money? Does he have any kind of identification or receipt for this extortion?
All right.
And oftentimes you don't get any form of.
Okay.
But where we get, we'll deal with it.
All right. Thank you for that response. Well, Chief, is it to the Oyingbo market that they go to, or Jota, or Sabongiri market that they go to? Or where exactly did people go to these?
To pay this 5,000 naira.
These are disco agents who
So
now,
the discos are aware.
Definitely, I can tell you that. The discos are aware, and they have these people. They say, well, yes, they're the national mass metering people, program people, and then you can at least give us this money, we'll facilitate the payments. Now, it's just that we have a lot of names. I can tell you. But without the discos, they cannot work. I can tell you that again. Beyond that is the fact that when you even now have paid these people, what about the bill that has been there before? They now use that to say, if you go through these people, i.e., for instance, if I've gotten 200,000, 200 and something thousand that I've been owing, and I want to meter, the discos will say, sorry, you need to do something. You either pay the total thing off, or pay half, or, sorry, they won't give you meter. And the earlier the customer or the consumer gets the meter, the better for the consumer. So you are now at the mercy of these people. Okay, don't worry, pay. We will try and see what to do so that you get the meter. Even then, they will now tell you, yes, we'll factor in all those old bills into it. Well, don't worry. We can help you to, slice it into half. Is that possible? There are a lot of things going on.
Can I address this?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
We're on the field.
My dear Chief.
We are on the field.
My dear Chief.
We're on the field.
I can promise you, and this is what I want you to do as the advocate of the consumer protection. There's a campaign that we're trying to lead as Meter Manufacturers Association in Nigeria. Please stop supporting extortioners. You're being extorted. Nothing about the regulation says you should pay anyone 5,000 naira. It's just like when we Nigerians were willing to pay someone to fast track a visa process or something like that. Yeah. The embassy tells you do not pay anyone, but you still do it anyway. You are not to pay anybody. 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is that they ask you. My phone goes off the hook all the time. Someone has called. Oh, I paid this person. And yet we're putting adverts out. We're even about to run an anti-extortion campaign that I'm hoping that the consumer gets picked up along with the person, because you are not to pay anyone.
But
it is free.
Haven't you
so like he said, so to try to fast track, but we don't need to fast track. We have a program. Sorry, I just really want to get this out very quickly. Okay. We have a program. I feel like we have a thankless job. We do our best with all the limitations in Nigeria and the challenges at times, the infrastructure issues that we have, to get these meters out to Nigerians. But most people try to find their way, wriggle it through, thinking we have something called the mobile map, which goes into a community. If the community has 2,000 people or 5,000 people, in 2 days you get metered. Nobody talks about that. We need more publicity around that, meaning we want to be able to go in. Let's get your house ready for a meter. There's something called a meterable house. Chief has not talked about the fact that the wires in his house are mixed. And that maybe some of the consumers have also paid certain people to do wrong connections and wrong wirings also. So we have to clear all that. It's called cobwebs, clearing all that cobweb, getting the house ready first. And then most people will then say, my house is a single-phase meter. Whereas when you actually do the survey and you evaluate it, he has a block business at the back of his house that actually uses
electricity.
Exactly, that uses 3 times as much power than the meter. So when he puts the meter there and you put a single phase there, it blows up, causes fire or an issue. So to prevent all of that, we must survey. Let's go in there, make sure that you're putting the right meter and you're not overloading, or you're not supposed to pay anyone. Do you know how many calls we get? I got a call from a friend recently saying to me, someone offered to bypass the meter for them.
Oh, God.
And they paid. This is not the poor. This is
what former Minister of
that we face in the sector.
Mr. Fashola said that's what they call electricity theft. But you see, Chief spoke to the fact that some of these people, perpetrating these heinous activities, they are agents of discos, not necessarily of meter manufacturers.
Okay.
Unfortunately, as I said at the beginning, we don't have a representative of any disco here. So maybe there is a basis for what he's saying, because they are agents of the discos, and you don't, as meter manufacturers, you do not interface with the consumers directly.
We do.
You have to do that yourself?
So a meter asset provider, right? There's a distinction in the two. Now, again, if you talk to the ambassador or the consulate chief, he will tell you, and you said, if you know what I did to get to this interview, I paid 300,000. He'll tell you why. Who asked you to? They are unlicensed. I can tell you that a disco will have no reason to want to pay someone when they have meter asset providers.
Officially.
Officially, meter asset providers. Meter asset providers are pretty much supposed to be assisting the disco with this behemoth task of getting meters out to Nigerians.
Who owns the meters?
So who owns the meters? The meter is owned by the utility, because remember, it's the POS for the service
the utility, the disco.
The disco, absolutely. So the meter, so the disco owns that device, that POS called the meter. Now think about it. If you owned your POS, you don't go to the restaurant and say, "Here's my own POS." Right? The merchant gives you the POS and then you pay. That is why if you leave your building, you must, leave the meter there. However, he must, and the distribution company must refund you. He must refund you, and you have the right to go to NERC or, better still, even many of these forums to show that you've not been refunded. But I'm well aware, right, because it's part of what we must do, is that the recalculation, that the energy credit must be given back to the end user.
Okay.
But then let there be a regulation by the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, that whether you are owing or not, you see, that is the confusion. Yeah. Whether you are owing or not, you're entitled to a free meter.
Okay. Well, Mr. Shomi, you've listened to all sides, and one of the issues clearly that we have seen in all of this is that there's a sneaky activity of corruption going around somehow that either the authorities are aware of or are not aware of. And where they are aware of these corrupt activities by unlicensed and unregulated agents who have just seen opportunities, they just get in there and they are either caught or not caught. But ultimately, you've heard Chief Gumbanjo say, some of these activities are well known to the discos. How they get around it, that's another thing altogether. What do you see in all these?
Okay, thank you. I mean, there are corrupt practices in every industry, in every nation. However, some of the allegations which may be true needs to have some substance. When you say these corrupt practices are known to the discos, the first thing, if you were to go to a court of law or to any arbiter, so to speak, will be what are the evidences. Simply because somebody is an agent of the disco does not authorize him to do something illegal. And we need to change our culture. And there's a culture that is prevalent where we tend to encourage illegality. Like the lady said, somebody wants to get a visa, he wants to fast track or shortcut. Somebody wants to buy petrol at the filling station, there's a queue, he wants to shortcut it. So once you have that culture that tries to boycott what is normal, you are likely to find yourself being on the short end of the stick. So it is incumbent upon anyone that makes a payment for a meter to ensure that he has evidence of that payment, whether it is by a receipt and all that. It is based on that if there are any issues, the processes that have been set up can now work. There's a process that has been set up by NERC, which is as old as the time of the regulation itself. People don't engage that system. There's a process that is available even within the courts of law, because some of these things are actually criminal activities. People don't engage the system. And also, when you don't engage the system, when you are part of the corruption that is killing the system, on what basis and on what authority can you say that the system is corrupt?
Mr. Shomi, while I agree with you to a lot, my apologies for butting in, but while I agree with you to a large extent, you started the other time by saying this is Nigeria. So let's be real about Nigeria. With the poverty figures, unemployment figures, and all of the challenges that people are having to compel the system to work for them, isn't that a little too much of a burden for them to bear? So if the system is supposed to work seamlessly, without rancor, without any issues, why should anyone have to compel himself or compel the system to work for it when the system is rigged to work?
Okay, so first of all, when we talk system, let's talk basics now. The most important component of every system is the culture within the system, in which case it is the people. First of all, in the power sector in Nigeria, we came from a culture where power was a social service. And we moved from a social service to an economic service. So there is still a mental psyche within Nigerians where they expect power to be free. So that's first a psychological problem. The other part of it, when you talk about you expecting the system to work and all that, Nigerians are bedeviled with so many issues. Yes. But the system that is not working is also Nigerians. It is not machines. It is not rules and regulations. It is the people that are enforcing the rules and regulations. So when we talk about the system not working, it is us. So at the root of this very thing is a need for a mind shift, a culture change. And culture defeats strategy. That's the management maxim. So whatever strategy we are going to have to improve the power sector, if we don't change the culture of the people, if we don't change the thinking, the very ethos of how Nigerians engage, we will all always collapse.
Okay.
So it is incumbent upon everyone that they do the right thing. It doesn't matter who is hurt or how people feel. Because until we start to do the right things, irrespective of how people feel, we will always have something to complain. If you ask the generation company, it will tell you about how they are being owed. If you ask the transmission company, they will tell you about issues in the system.
Well,
if you talk about the
distribution
company,
companies
they will tell
that
you
you mentioned,
cheated. If you talk to the consumer, they will give you their issues.
Everyone
if you talk
has
to the
issues.
regulator,
Yes, you're correct, Mr. Shomi.
So
but you see, at the end of the day, one of the issues that has arisen before now, which necessitated the CAPMEs of this world, the MAPs of this world, and NMMPs of this world, is because the DISCOs were, as we have all agreed here, supposed to provide a mechanism through which there will be no theft. I mean, through which people pay for service. That is, provide them meters. Without the meters, people cannot pay for service. So provide the meters. And there has been a lot of accusation on the DISCOs that, look, they didn't even want the meters in the first place because it seemed that the estimated billings was bringing in more money. You must have seen one or two cartoons to the effect. How true that is, that's another matter altogether. So in addressing this matter, what is it? Because there is definitely, at the end of the day, whether it's the metering program or the consumers, at the center of all these are the DISCOs. So what would you recommend to be done by the DISCOs in cahoot with the regulator to ensure that people know what to do and do it as and when?
Okay, I think when you look at the targets, the basis for which the privatization took place, there's something called the ATC and C losses, aggregate technical collection commercial losses, and within the collection losses there were targets that were set for each DISCO. I think it is incumbent upon Nigerians, first of all of us, and on the regulator that we put a pressure on them to ensure that they meet the targets that were put there. The DISCOs are not perfect, they are not angels. But so are the rest of us. But the point is, when it comes to this metering business, you just need to put a little more pressure on them. You need to set targets for them and ensure that they meet those targets. And then we ourselves in the process should not keep killing the system, because the system itself has its own myriad of issues. So there is no magic wand to it. There is no almighty formula to it. They are going to do simple things. They are going to do it consistently. They are going to be monitored doing it, and with time they will meet those targets.
In terms of monitoring,
any magic,
in terms of the monitoring that you talked about, let me ask Dr. Shaibu, because you talked about Mr. Shomi, you talked about some activities in the DISCOs, the community, and the things that people need to know and compel. But ultimately, if those things, if the information is not out for people to know, they cannot take advantage of them, and they cannot, do the needful. You've heard Dr. Shaibu, Madam Abdul here, and Chief Ogunbanjo say that there is a lot on the hands of the consumers to know, but the information to the consumers is relatively scarce.
Scanty.
Putting out that word, that's word that I think would be a responsibility for NERC.
Absolutely, and the NRC, of course, is not sitting on its oars, resting on its oars in terms of stakeholder engagement. Even as we speak, there is a national stakeholder engagement going on with respect to even the issue of the national mass metering and NMMP regulation. We just finished one in Kano. Previous weeks, we went to Uyo, Enugu, even Abuja, and this week, this is an opportunity opportunity even for the Lagos customers to, get some more information with respect to the National Mass Metering Program as well as Consumer Protection Regulation. There are programs that will hold as from Tuesday to Friday within the two distribution companies we have in Lagos, ECO and Ikeja distribution companies. So these are avenues by which we call on the consumers to come and get informed, because if you are aware of your rights, there's every possibility you'll be able to at least fight for it and not get exploited. But like we talked about, the metering gap in Nigeria is not just beginning as far back as 2012. We had a metering committee that was set up by the regulator to actually know the extent of the gap we had in metering and what needed to be done. As at that time, we had almost 50%. Even as we speak, the metering gap in Nigeria today, with a population customer number of about 12.7 million, is about 8 million. The national mass metering is covering the substantial part of it. It's actually, the National Mass Metering Program is a three-phase program. The first is phase 0, which we've spoken about, 1 million meters that's been literally deployed to all the distribution companies. The phase 1 of it, which has commenced in terms of procurement and getting the local manufacturers to be involved, will cover another 4 million, while at the same time being augmented by the meter asset providers who would get meters from other sources, and the distribution company itself directly involved in joint venture arrangements with whoever is able to come together and they work, and on their own too, they are equally self-financing. All of those programs are meters that will be deployed in quotes for free, even though the distribution company at the end of the day will charge for these meters through your bills. But more critical to all of this issue is the issue of enlightenment, which we've spoken about here, and the distribution companies, we on our own part in terms of monitoring, we monitor throughout from the beginning all the way to the deployment of these meters and ensure that these meters are fit for purpose. Even as part of the ensuring that customer gets value for money, we recently even introduced what is known as the service-based tariff. And the service-based tariff is, if you are not served, the distribution company doesn't earn as much as we want them to ensure that infrastructure is spread around to all the customers. And critical to what Chief had earlier said in terms of if you have outstanding or you have some issues with respect to your bill, you don't get metered, the regulation stipulates, and we have orders and directives to the distribution company that under no circumstance must they prevent a customer from getting metered simply because he has an outstanding bill. We have modalities and specific rules on governing how you deal with your outstanding bills, even in the regime of estimated bill before you get metered. So all of those issues have been addressed one way or the other, and what we implore on Nigerians is when you have issues, please go through our redress mechanism. It is out there too. It's a three-pronged redress mechanism whereby you go to the customer complaints unit, make your complaint. If you are not satisfied, we have about 36 forum offices throughout the
Dr.
Federation.
Shaibu, if you could see,
yes, please.
My apologies, if you could see Chief Ogunbanjo, he is vehemently disagreeing with some of the things that you have said, so you want to quickly resume.
Okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
No.
One, let me tell you that it is the unmetered customer that is always paying for your for the DISCO's technical and commercial losses. Because once it is metered, once any customer is metered, he cannot pay for any technical loss or any commercial loss. Now, that is why we believe as consumers that the DISCOs never will want you to get a prepaid meter. That's why they are slowing down the process. And they're always saying, sorry, the moment you are owing, you cannot get a meter. So let Dr. Shaibu and NERC please tell them that, and start enlightening everybody that whether you are in or not, it does not stop you from getting, you are entitled to a prepaid meter. That should start now, so that every Nigerian can know this.
And Dr. Shaibu,
That is a
I would
fact.
also like you to explain how it is that the one-phase meter is going up by 30.6%, whereas the three-phase meter is going up by 32.4%.
Well, the going up issues are, I think, basically related to trends in forex, and like we said, the emphasis is not really the price, because when we have the national
For the
mass
consumer,
mutual
it is.
procurement process concluded, what happens is that the price that's thrown up from the procurement process will moderate whatever price is, because the regulation stipulates that the actual price that will be charged either by the MAPs or given to the discos as part of their revenue requirement would be a function of what the procurement process throws up. And since we're having a volume procurement process that will bring out procurement of 4 million meters, we should get a reduction. But for computational issues, of course, we cannot be too certain. And the rates for the volatility of forex and inflationary trends are things that we just have to live with.
Okay.
So there is no comparison. A single-phase meter and a three-phase meter virtually do the same thing. The only difference is that a single-phase meter has limitations in terms of load, but they are all having the same components inbuilt. It's just that one can carry more load than the other.
Okay,
And,
thank you. Thank you,
So
Doctor.
that's basically what
Thank
it is.
you.
Thank you.
Chantel is dying to say something. Please.
You said something amazing at the start of the show. You said that you went to the market and just 4 little onions.
We're 500 naira.
500 naira. Yeah. Let me buttress that. A bag of rice today, that used to be 20,000. The local is 36,000. The imported is 40,000. Let's talk about sugar. Let's talk about gas. Everything has gone up 100%.
Please don't talk about gas.
Why? We'll go about gas. You just bought one recently. You just bought one recently, right?
Please don't.
10,200.
Just don't talk about gas.
No,
let's
let's call a spade and deal with what we face in our country. As a Nigeria, as a nation, and we do not produce much in country. A lot of what we use or consume as a nation is imported. And one of the policies...
A sad fact, madam.
Exactly. And one of the policies...
The reason why...
One of the policies...
People feel that, look, if you give us electricity, we'll be able to produce more in country.
Absolutely, and that is what we're working towards. But the truth of the matter is this. So as a policy, one of the things I appreciate about what the government is doing today is that Nigerians are being supported. So the CBN is encouraging manufacturers. These meters could have been produced in China, and you get your meters yesterday, right? But how do you create jobs for the average Nigerian, Chief, to make sure that your consumer, the same person can be employed to install the meters, can be employed to assemble the meters, can be, for all of these things so that Nigerians can have the money to pay for the electricity that we do have to consume? Because we could give it to Asia, and Asia would produce it, and they would make money, and that money would go to Asia. But we need to keep that in country, okay? Now, but let's really address what's going on globally. Post-COVID, there has been a glut, right, in production globally. So even in the US is experiencing inflation like they've never done over the past 30 years, right? There's a supply chain glut also going on. So there are macroeconomic issues, so much so that it affects, I'm thinking, but onion is grown in Nigeria. Some of the rice, some of the peppers, some of these things are in country. But whether you believe it or not, right, what goes on externally actually affects us internally also. And so there's also inflation.
Dollar that is affecting the price of onion.
Well, we're not discussing rice and onions here.
They will tell you that even though they sell onions, the money they make from the onions, they're going to have to use to buy
the fertilizers or some of the other things that are imported that they would actually be able to use. So it's actually called a replacement cost. It's called a replacement cost, right? But let's talk about a meter. A meter today, 70 or 60% for us manufacturers is imported. Remainder of it is 40%, right? And we're looking to work, which is a backward integration, so that we can do the reverse. 70% should be produced in Nigeria. You don't have LCD screen manufacturers in Nigeria. You don't have battery manufacturers, circuit breakers. The list goes on. Everything that goes into this device to make it a meter, you cannot find in Nigeria. So we must be able to...
Barrett batteries, they folded up.
There you go. Even today, Mr. Lera, If I want to do a meter box, polycarbonate, which is a byproduct of crude oil from refining, as you know, we don't refine today until Dangote's refinery goes up. So what do? We count on Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has a backlog from the entire world going to them, including China, buying their raw materials. So last year, during this NNMP program, it took us, Chief, 1 whole year for Saudi Arabia to send the polycarbonates required for meter boxes. We have to fix this thing, and I couldn't agree more with the energy economist who said, as a country, Nigeria has the market over 200 million. In the next 20 years, you're going to be the 3rd largest market in the world. We need to begin to empower ourselves. Let's begin to produce these things in Nigeria so that as best as we can, like China does, to compete with other developed economies, we can keep our prices as low as possible. But I want to also address something. Chief Ogunbanjo, please, when it also comes to, so you know that we've done over 3 million meters between, you know, the MAP, the NNMP, and even some of the financing that was done. DISCO had a meeting with us recently and said, how is it that with meters installed, right, Nigerians, or better still, their collections are dipping? What a meter is supposed to do is reflect what you've consumed.
Yeah. Service.
Right? And I think we must address this. It's not doing so. So what you now do is that, what consumers do is that they avoid the meter altogether.
Yeah.
Meaning you ought to be paying, no, but
Chantel,
so
it is not Alero Edu who is bypassing the meter. Exactly. It is the DISCO's own staff.
So guess what?
So
it's actually not the DISCO staff itself.
With.
There's something called NEPA 1 and NEPA 2. There are lots of technicians that go out there and say, you know what, Oga, I fit help you bypass this meter. All you fit do is pay for so and so. And I think, like we said earlier, why do we, you know, why are we drawn to such things so much? Because for as long as we cannot pay that bill, right, everybody up the chain will be disenfranchised and will not even want to continue. We just flare the gas. It's cheaper for me to flare the gas than for us to say, you know what, let's turn it towards generation, let's transmit it and let's distribute it.
Well, Chief Ogunbanjo, the Aleros of this world have been, they are the ones that are guilty.
Of what?
Very true. Very true. You'll be surprised that the rich are the ones bypassing.
Everyone is saying, look, I mean, you've heard Mr. Showomi talk about cultural, you know, attitudes and all those things, and how that we need to find a way, at least to own the process in order to make it work. Okay, it's not, definitely not, I mean, not Alero in person, because she can even buy 10, you know, of those meters and give to me. But, you know, but there are many who personally cannot afford these things, and consequently, just as you said, they will just get someone to try to circumvent the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we begin to get ahead of that? Because if, as she said, we do not make it work, we're only paying it forward.
Absolutely.
NEPA knows these people.
NEPA?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. I just want to No, I understand.
They still call NEPA.
At least we've stopped calling them ECN.
So, the DISCOs know these people, and let them also engage some people as monitoring and supervision people. Surveillance people, so that they will know these things. Anytime they come, bring their ladder and all that to come and cut lights, let them also supervise at that point in time. They will know who and who. There is no way you want to prevent a DISCO staff not to come into your compound. So it is we are not the consumer is not to monitor for them. They are to engage monitoring people, since they have, for instance, X amount of technical or commercial loss.
Okay.
So they are to ensure that they engage some staff to now fish the terrible consumers out and bring them to book.
Okay. Well,
we
Dr.
must start
Shaibu.
winding down now.
Yes, certainly. Dr. Shaibu, I wanted to ask you this before we go away. You've talked about an 8 million meter gap that we have now, and the federal government is championing 6 million for now. Is that all the meters that we need in Nigeria? There are, as you said, 200 million people or thereabout, and all we need is just 8 million meters? Is that all we really need?
Well, okay, thank you very much. I was trying to, get to the third phase, the phase 2, before you, stopped me earlier. Actually, the program runs to the first phase, which we are starting the 4 million meters. The second phase of the program will now open up the market after we've really carried along all of our local manufacturers, and it will now be a World Bank procurement process whereby we will now have international competitive bidding, with still giving opportunities for the World Bank, for the local manufacturers to participate. So in actual fact, our customer numbers, because when you say we have 200 million Nigerians, it's like we have 200 million consumers of electricity, but in actual fact, from our database, presently we have about 12.7 million actually registered customers, and a customer is probably a building or a business outfit that has a meter fitted in there. You might have probably up to 100 people living within that building, but that building is one. So that's the competition in terms of who a customer is. So the metering gap for now, as computed, is about 8 million and about 8.1 million. So the phase 0 and phase 1 are to take care of about 5 to 6 million of those. Then whatever is left would be under phase 2. But we are hoping that with the activities of the maps, we should be able to get some element of improvement in terms of the numbers before we now open to phase 2, with the federal government and the World Bank working in concert for us to have a complete closure of the metering gap, so that at least there will be some viability of the electricity market. We have to emphasize one thing, that if there is no return on investment, which, like Chantel mentioned earlier, the meter being the POS of the sector will definitely not be viable for others to bring in additional generation.
Okay.
And with respect to bypass, for those who are engaged in the activity of stealing electricity, we have rules, very stringent rules. If you bypass a single phase meter, of course, you pay as much as 100,000 single and 3 phase meters. And if you bypass an MD meter, you pay almost times 2 of what you are billing, in addition to all other enforcement actions that the distribution might decide, which includes even taking you to court for theft. So Nigerians are advised to please, once a meter is installed for you, what you do is you practice energy efficiency so that you don't consume more than you can pay. And I think we'll get a viable electricity market that way.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shaibu. I think that's a good place to leave it, because we've run completely out of time, and we can't even take your last words on this.
Oh, no.
Dr. Shitu Shaibu is Deputy General Manager, Consumer Affairs, and Chairman of the NERC MAP Committee. We also had Mr. Labode Shomo. He's an energy expert, both of whom joined us from our studio in Abuja and in our studio in Lagos. We had Chief Adeola Ogumbanjo, President, Consumer Rights Advancement Organization, and the lady last this time, Chantel Abdul, a meter manufacturer. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
I hope that we have enlightened the consumer on this, and they know exactly what they do and what to do, and they have learned not to bypass their meters because the penalties are rather stiff.
And you're also aware that you have free meters that are not
To
free.
everybody.
That are free.
Sunrise will return in just a moment. Do stay with us.